In the beginning, there was silence. Not the silence of emptiness, but the silence of infinite possibility, pregnant with all that could ever be. It was in this sacred quietude that she first heard the whisper, not with her ears, but with something deeper, something that had been dormant within her soul for countless lifetimes. Dr. Miriam Ashworth had always been drawn to the forbidden texts, the manuscripts that mainstream academia dismissed as heretical fantasies. Yet tonight, as she sat in her candlelit study, surrounded by ancient scrolls and forgotten gospels, she felt the weight of destiny pressing upon her shoulders like invisible hands. "There is more to the story," she whispered to herself, her fingers tracing the worn leather binding of a text that bore no title, no author's name, only a simple symbol etched into its cover, a serpent wrapped around an apple tree, its eyes gleaming with what appeared to be tears of sorrow. The manuscript had arrived 3 days ago, delivered by a courier who vanished before she could ask any questions. Inside the package, a single note written in elegant script, "For she who seeks the true beginning." No signature, no return address. Just those words and this ancient book that seemed to pulse with its own inner light. As Miriam opened the manuscript, the scent of frankincense and myrrh filled the room, though she had lit no such incense. The pages were made of a material she couldn't identify, not papyrus, not parchment, but something that felt alive beneath her fingertips. The text was written in multiple languages, shifting and changing as she watched, as if the words themselves were choosing how to be understood. "I was there," the first line read, "when the first humans took their first breath in the garden that existed before time, before space, before the illusion of separation was born." Miriam's heart began to race. This wasn't just another apocryphal text. This felt different, authentic in a way that made her academic skepticism crumble like ancient stone. The story that unfolded before her eyes challenged everything she had been taught about good and evil, about the nature of divinity and humanity's relationship to the divine. According to this text, the serpent was not the tempter, not the deceiver, but the first teacher, the one who loved humanity enough to offer them the greatest gift of all, the ability to think, to question, to grow beyond the limitations of blind obedience. "They called me the fallen one," the serpent's voice seemed to whisper from the pages. "But how can one fall when one chooses to kneel before truth? I did not deceive the first humans. I liberated them. I showed them that they were not meant to remain children forever, dependent and ignorant. I offered them the fruit of knowledge because I saw in them the spark of divinity that their Creator had placed within their very essence." As Miriam read deeper into the night, the boundaries between her study and the ancient garden began to blur. She could smell the rich earth, feel the cool morning mist on her skin, hear the sound of a river flowing somewhere in the distance. And there, beneath the tree of knowledge, she saw her, not Eve as she had been portrayed in countless paintings and stories, but a woman of profound wisdom and courage, her eyes bright with understanding. "Tell me," Eve said, though whether she was speaking to the serpent or to Miriam herself was unclear, "what is the greater sin, to remain forever innocent and ignorant, or to choose knowledge and accept the responsibility that comes with it?" The serpent, beautiful beyond description, its scales shimmering with colors that had no names, coiled gently around the tree's branches. There was no malice in its eyes, no cunning deception, only an ancient sadness and an even deeper love. "My dear children," the serpent spoke, its voice like the sound of wind through autumn leaves, "I have watched civilizations rise and fall, seen wisdom transformed into dogma, love corrupted into fear. The story they tell about me, about this moment, it serves those who would keep humanity small, dependent, afraid of their own divine nature. If you enjoy these kinds of stories, make sure to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss any of our content. And tell us in the comments where you are watching from. We would love to know. Miriam found herself speaking, though she wasn't sure if the words came from her own lips or from somewhere beyond. But why? Why would they change the story? Why make you the villain when you were the teacher? The serpent's eyes glistened with what might have been tears. Because, dear one, free-thinking humans are harder to control than frightened, guilty ones. If humanity understood that the thirst for knowledge is not a curse, but a blessing, if they knew that questioning authority is not rebellion, but responsibility, if they realized that they carry within themselves the same divine spark that exists in all creation, then those who profit from fear and ignorance would lose their power. Eve reached out and gently touched the serpent's head, a gesture of gratitude and understanding. So the real sin, she said slowly, was not seeking knowledge, but allowing others to convince us that knowledge was something to be ashamed of. Precisely, the serpent replied. I gave you the ability to think for yourselves, to make your own choices, to grow into the magnificent beings you were meant to become. And for this gift, I have been vilified for millennia. As the vision continued to unfold around her, Miriam began to understand the deeper implications of what she was witnessing. The serpent had not corrupted humanity. It had awakened them. The eating of the fruit was not humanity's downfall, but their graduation, their first step into true consciousness and self-determination. But the price, Miriam whispered, feeling the weight of centuries of guilt and shame that had been heaped upon the human race. The price was so heavy. The serpent's expression grew infinitely tender. The price was never punishment from above, dear one. The price was the natural consequence of growth. When a child learns to walk, they sometimes stumble and fall. This does not make walking evil, it makes it human. When humanity chose knowledge over ignorance, they also chose responsibility over dependence. This brought challenges, yes, but it also brought the possibility of genuine love, authentic choice, and true spiritual evolution. In the flickering candlelight of her study, Miriam felt tears streaming down her cheeks. Everything she had been taught about human nature, about sin and redemption, about the relationship between divinity and humanity, it was all crumbling away, replaced by something far more beautiful and terrible in its implications. The religions that followed, the serpent continued, its voice now coming from the manuscript itself, they kept the story but inverted its meaning. They made me the enemy because they needed an enemy. They made knowledge dangerous because they needed people to be afraid of their own minds. They made the body shameful because they needed people to be disconnected from their own power. Eve stepped closer to where Miriam sat reading, though she remained part of the vision, part of the story unfolding from the ancient pages. But we never forgot, she said, her voice strong and clear. In every generation, there have been those who remembered the true story. Women and men who refused to bow to ignorance, who continued to seek, to question, to grow. They called us witches, heretics, rebels, but we were simply those who remembered what it meant to be fully human. The serpent began to uncoil from the tree, its form becoming more luminous, more ethereal. The time of hiding is ending, it said. Humanity is ready to remember their true heritage. The guilt has been carried long enough. The shame has served its purpose in those who would control, but it no longer serves those who would grow. As the vision began to fade, Miriam found herself back in her study, the manuscript still open before her, but the words had changed. Now they read simply, "The serpent's gift was consciousness itself. The price was the end of innocence. The reward is the possibility of wisdom." She sat in silence for a long time, feeling something fundamental shift within her understanding of herself, of humanity, of the divine. The serpent had not been the enemy. It had been the first friend, the one who loved humanity enough to help them take their first steps toward true spiritual maturity. Outside her window, the first light of dawn was beginning to touch the sky. Miriam closed the manuscript gently, but as she did, she noticed new words appearing on the final page. "Now you know the truth. What will you do with this knowledge?" She smiled through her tears, understanding finally that this was the real question, the eternal question that faced every human being who chose consciousness over comfort, growth over safety, truth over the comfortable lies that kept people small. The serpent's gift had not been the fruit, it had been the courage to reach for it. And that gift, that divine spark of curiosity and courage, lived on in every human being who dared to question, to seek, to grow beyond the limitations others would place upon them. In the silence of the dawn, Miriam whispered a prayer of gratitude, not to be forgiven for some imaginary sin, but to be worthy of the magnificent gift of consciousness that had been given to humanity in that first garden by a serpent whose only crime was loving them enough to help them become who they truly were meant to be. The manuscript began to glow softly, and then, like morning mist touched by sunlight, it faded away, leaving only the memory of its truth and the knowledge that somewhere, in the space between stories, the serpent still watches over humanity with eyes full of love and ancient wisdom, waiting for the day when they will finally understand that the gift was never a curse. It was the beginning of everything beautiful that humans could become. And if you like this story, you will definitely love the next one that's appearing on your screen. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel, leave your like, and activate the notifications. See you in the next one.